Welcome to Mini Mastery. In this series, we're going to be painting my players' miniatures from primered to tabletop ready. We're going to be going through each player's mini and starting from just a primered mini and painting it through layer by layer, step by step. You'll be able to see the progress, follow along, and learn about the characters who are in our current campaign. Let's check it out. All right, we're going to be working on the fabrics and leather for Jaw, who in our campaign is a half-elf paladin. So we're going to be really focusing on the kind of second layer from the skin. There's tunic, there's collar, he's got his sleeves. We're also going to be looking at anywhere that has pants showing under some of the armor. There are a few places that it's a little bit harder to find where the armor separates. And then of course the boots in leather. The tunic is a little funky, I can see as I'm looking at it, especially by the vambrace. One side has a full vambrace, the other has just the lower, and in the sculpt it is missing the forearm vambrace on one side. But that's okay, we're going to paint it as it's sculpted. So here we're going to speed it up just so it doesn't take as long. We're putting on just a base coat of linen white on the tunic. So we're very early in the game. This is the first mini of this newer campaign that we've started to play that I'm going to be painting miniatures for. So Jaw is the first mini of the adventuring party to get painted. And a very interesting concept on the character. The player has chosen his path, and it's very much a redemption type character, and it's starting to have some interesting in-game pieces because he's looking kind of for peace after having a soldier background. He's not wanting to be that murder hobo, which is fantastic. I love it. It's very interesting. I think with paladins, it's a great path to choose that allows you to explore how to step away from some of the more trope, I guess, backgrounds and character stories. So it's really interesting, but early on in the game, so we've still got a lot to go through with character development and see how it goes. Of course, the more we play, the more it impacts how I view the character in their mini form. But you can see here, just checking out, making sure I've got good coverage everywhere on the linen white. And that's the base coat. That's going to be the medium coat. So a couple of thin layers. We want to keep everything thin so the details show through. With this sped up, it's kind of nice to see the faster progression versus painting. But we'll slow it down. We'll have some times where we'll slow it down so you can see what we've done, and then we'll speed it up to paint as well. But that's the linen white on the tunic parts where the shirt of this mini is. Now we're going to go and switch it up a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and base coat the pant area. So here I'm going with just a really dark blue, and I struggled with the paint colors here for quite a bit. It doesn't have a lot showing. I know there's going to be armor. I want to incorporate greens, which is the player's favorite color. So I thought, worst case scenario, I'm going to go with more of a jeans look on the pants. So kind of a step away from that fantasy genre. But I think it'll stand out really well against the armor, and it'll augment any areas that we do green, like the tabard, or it's almost a loin cloth. But just doing base colors. And this is a little different because normally I just stick to one color at a time and go all the way through its color progressions. But because I want to allow the thin layers to dry thoroughly, I decided to go ahead and do multiple colors and knock out all of the textiles or the fabrics and leather at once. I figured video-wise it would be about the right amount to paint to cover a decent timeline to where it's not too long to watch, but still interesting enough that you're able to stick with it. So just doing multiple thin coats of a dark blue. And this is the shadow actually, not the base color, not the medium. So you can see the blue coming through against that gray primer. I think it's looking pretty good. I think I hit it pretty well in coverage. So now we're going to change up and we're going to do the mid layer, which is going to be the base layer of the boots. And this is just leather brown. And again, just a couple of thin coats that we'll put on here. So as we go through the three different parts, you'll see a couple of different techniques. So here on the boots with leather brown and with the tunic with the linen white, those are both mid-tones. But on the pants, I did the shadow color, the darkest color first. And as we go through and work on some further details, I'll tell you why I did it in two different ways. But for these boots, it's just mid-tone and just a couple of thin layers. I want to make sure the coverage is really even and none of that gray shows through. Just a couple of little touches there. And making sure no gray is showing. I think it looks pretty good. Nice even coat. And boots are done. Now this here is the vambrace I was talking about. You can see on that side it's got the front and back. On this side it's got that area on the top forearm, but on the back forearm there's no vambrace. So again, just an interesting little detail. We're going to paint the vambraces to match. It's just one side will have that leather, the other won't, but we're not going to touch those just yet. So here we are laying down the wash of a shadow, and this is khaki. We're just putting that fairly generously over top of the linen white, and that's going to, because it's a wash, it's thinner than the regular paint, it's going to settle in the crevices and in the deeper details. So it's going to have that separated point and give shadow. So as you can see, it's tinted a little bit from what that linen white was. I don't know how well it's going to show, but you may be wondering why we didn't do the khaki first and then highlight up from that. For me, I find with the linen whites and everything, it's easier to start with a mid-tone and just do a thin wash. Otherwise, the shadows get to be too dark and you have to do more layering up to your lighter colors. So we're going to speed it up here again, and I'm going to go through, and here we're doing the next mid-tone on the pants. So this is the standard process of starting from the darkest and lightening up, which we did not do on the tunic. So here we're only covering about 3/4 of what we initially painted, and this is actually a blend from the shadow color to the actual mid-tone. So this is just a blend of the two. So we want to have more subtle gradient colors on this process. And we're just laying these in really carefully. Again, just covering about 3/4 of what that dark shadow color of the darkest blue laid in. Because I want these to be like jean materials, I want them to go up to a really lighter blue. And looking pretty decent as we go through and just make sure everything's covered. Let's go ahead and slow it down and give a quick preview of it once we get ready to put the brush down. I know at this early stage it's hard to see some of the gradient changes in color, but they'll be picked up more and more as we continue. Next we're going to move on to the boots. It'll be a shorter sped up time, but we're going to use a medium brown just to start getting into the shadows and laying in those depths right over top of the leather brown. Again, Jaw, this last session, I kind of felt bad. All of the characters had just challenging roles on things like initiative, but they're continuing to advance in level, and of course we'll continue to play with these characters, and a lot of it is just getting synergy in. So here, just doing the next layer of the blues, and again these will look kind of like denim pants, but as we continue to highlight up, you'll see the blues get brighter and brighter. Once we get more of the highlights on, your eye will see the variance from the shadow color up. But this again is only about 1/2 of what we painted before. So continuing to leave those darker colors visible and continuing with thin layers. Let's slow it down a little bit and do a quick look, see how that catches your eye. Starting to make it out more as a blue, a true blue. And that's due to the shadows going up to highlights. So moving back to the tunic, this is again just linen white. And because we put on the shadow wash, it darkened out all of the tunic. And while the darkest parts are still in the shadow, this linen white going back over the raised details is going to make those stand out even more from that wash, that blend of the khaki and linen white. But a really good technique here. Very different from what we did on the pants, but this works really well for lighter colors like tunics and fabrics that are white. This one here for Jaw, as the character continues to progress, it's going to be interesting to see what their weapons of choice are. When I'm picking the minis, I just pick it more on race and class than what they're holding in hands, but I had thought after a moment of switching out his weapon and moving it from a sword to a morning star, but I'm just going to keep the minis. I normally just keep the minis exactly as they're sculpted, and again, this is just a gift for the players, so I always hope they enjoy it, but I love to paint them for them. All right, let's take a peek and see. I don't know how well that shows up. Of course, we'll be reviewing these, but I hope you can start to see the gradients in both the tunic and the pants, as well as the boots, I suppose. But we're going to speed up and do a little bit more painting here. I do want to finish the fabrics and leathers. So on to our next blue. And this is where you really start to be able to tell in colors, because these are getting into much brighter highlights. You can see I'm doing very small amounts, just where the light is really going to be hitting the fabric. And I think this blue, again, is going to complement any greens that we lay down, as well as stand out from the armor and any leather bits for the belt and pouches. But do a quick turnaround, see what you think. Put your comments below and let me know what you think of the mini so far, the techniques, the color choices, and Let's continue on this journey together of painting this adventuring party. The next steps we're going to do, we're going to speed up again just as I apply paint. I want to keep these watchable. So let me know if they're too long, if they're too short, if you want to see more, if you want me to sit down and paint more at once. Here we're just doing highlights on the boots. So same thing we did with the fabric. This is just starting to add back in that leather brown over top of the wash. You'll start to see where that variance from the wash came through. Let's get those all painted up and then do a slower spin around. So camera doesn't picture it as well as on the table, but you can start to see the shaded areas, a little bit darker brown from the leather. So it's coming along really pretty well. And because that was a super thin layer, I'm going to go ahead and stick to completing the boots. So this is khaki. And this is going to go over top the highest points and wear areas. So think about when you're wearing shoes, if you wear them for quite a while, where are they going to wear the most? So I'm looking primarily at the toe area, scraping against rocks on the roads. I'm looking at bits of the sole where you can see it. I'm looking at the outside of the foot, the heels, anywhere that you're going to get the most wear. I hope that shows up real good and you really see the worn leather look. I think it looks good. And just a couple more touches on that just to really define it. That just punches up those real highlights. We're going even smaller than the last layer. Of course, multiple thin layers. That's the ticket. And this will really make those leather boots seem kind of worn. Because remember, he was a soldier in the past. So in my mind, he's been wearing the same boots for a year or two and just getting out of service with the in-game military. Looking good. And back to the tunic. So here we are laying in, this is called Frost Giant White, I believe. It's a Reaper paint. But just like with the boots, we're hitting only the highest points. So this blends really well from that linen white, but it isn't a pure white. So it won't look too contrasted. It won't look too fake. It's a little bit of a warmer color with this as a cooler color on top. So it really does a good job of looking like fabric. And I do imagine he has had a new shirt. Maybe not new boots, but at least a new shirt. So it's a little bit cleaner in tone. Even though it's using warm colors, it's a clean shirt at least. And on to our next highlight of blue. So you'll see this one here is really going to be very small in application, just at the highest high points where the light is hitting. And I know it's hard to see on the camera, but that has from the shadow up to the highlights on all colors. So Jaw is continuing to get painted, clothed, and ready for his adventure on the tabletop. Getting closer. And that is our fabrics and leather for tonight's session. We will go ahead and call that good for now. Thanks for watching our video. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we'd love to have you subscribe. Feel free to hit that button if you care to get notifications for when we post new content. Leave your comments below and help us answer the question of where will your adventures take you. Enjoy.